But let's take a look at Behemoth, right? So a lot of people speculate that these creatures, both the Leviathan and Behemoth, must be some sort of dinosaurs, must be some sort of reptilian creatures in that sense, or that they must be. I've heard hippopotamus, I've heard elephant, I've heard crocodiles, I've heard all kinds of things. But we'll get into a reason why it couldn't be any of those animals I just listed. However, Genesis 1:24 says, "Then God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth and their kind, after their kind." And it was so. So that word cattle, if you go to the next slide, is livestock, and maybe in other translations. But if you look there at the Hebrew word that was used to translate it, is Behemoth. And it means beast, cattle, animal, beasts, call of all animals, cattle, livestock, domesticated animals, wild beasts. So I think there's a focus there on bovine type creatures, cattle,
That's right.
Livestock. Seems to be prominent there in the definition for Behemoth.
Yes. Yeah. Very, very big correlation to this type of animal, what it is. Very different from the Leviathan. So here in Psalm 50, verse 10, it says, "For every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills."
All right. It was in 2 Ezra 6 that the Behemoth is on 1,000 mountains. It used the word mountains in that passage. So 1,000 hills, 1,000 mountains. Have to imagine it's the same, understanding. Trying to be conveyed.
I think this is what our brother Ken Heiderbrecht, bringing his words. I think this is why he was theorizing, if this reference to the 1,000 hills is in the Garden of Eden, then it would mean that the Behemoth is actually still above us in the third layer of the firmament right now in that garden.
Possible.
But it's possible. My only thought was, what I brought up to him when he considered that was, Jubilees tells us all the animals were kicked out when Adam and Eve were kicked out in Jubilees chapter 3,
it does.
327. So I don't know.
Could this be an exception? 2 Ezra 6, as we read this earlier, 1,000 mountains, so that he might live there, regarding Behemoth.
Nice.
But we got a clip here. A little bit of comedic relief. Hope you guys enjoy.
Behemoth.
Behemoth? What do you think he meant by that?
Behemoth is a dinosaur, He eats grass as an ox, his tail's like a cedar. His smoke are strong as bars of iron, he's cheap in the ways of God. Could Behemoth be a dinosaur, a mighty store?
No.
I don't know. I'm just not really feeling the Spirit's leading on this one. I don't think it's God's will.
But what is the creature Behemoth described immediately next to Leviathan? Some creationists are strongly convinced that Behemoth was a sauropod dinosaur like a brachiosaurus still loitering around in Job's day.
And there's even indication in the Bible of a dinosaur that lived beside a man after the flood. Go and read the book of Job, Job chapter 40, verse 15. Behemoth, the largest land animal God made. The description fits something like a sauropod dinosaur living with Job after the flood.
OMG! There are several reasons why we can safely say that Behemoth wasn't a dinosaur. To begin with, as any first-year Hebrew student will surely recognize, the name Behemoth is etymologically built on a run-of-the-mill Hebrew word frequently used for cattle, Behemoth. Bernard F. Bateau, a Hebraist at DePaul University who has specialized on the ancient Near Eastern context of Behemoth, has pointed out that if anything, linguistically the connotation therefore suggests that this is a sort of super ox. Second, there is also nothing whatsoever in the passage that describes him as reptilian, something we would reasonably expect if this were a brachiosaurus. Third, what's most notable about a sauropod like Brachiosaurus? That its neck is 85 feet long. Its entire biomorphology is framed around feeding from the tops of trees. If the author of Job was bragging about a sauropod's features and amazing physical capacity, you would think he would have mentioned these distinctions other than the pitiful line, "He feeds on grass like an ox." Expecting the Job author to omit the business about its 9 stories of neck seems about as unlikely as me bragging about a giraffe's features and forgetting to mention its neck.
This thing doesn't live in a swamp.
This thing's got, what, a 25 to 27 foot neck? Brachiosaurus.
Humans! Get them away! I don't get it. Behemoth.
Who knows what the man saw? And these are all going to be lean cuts, and they're all for quick cooking, are they?
Yeah, that's right.
Because when you look at this, you can't help thinking of lunch.
Job up again, trying to give us some description on Behemoth. You want this one?
Sure. So Job 40, starting at verse 15, says, "Behold now Behemoth, which I made as well as you." Real quick, shout out Spencer Murphy. Good to see you in the chat tonight, brother. "Behemoth, which I made as well as you. He eats grass like an ox." All right. "He is the first of the ways of God. Let his maker bring near his sword. Surely the mountains bring him food, and all the beasts of the field play there. Under the lotus plants he lies down, in the coverts of the reeds and the marsh." Remember that phrase, that he dwells in the reeds as his dwelling place. Remember that, because we'll check out something else that's interesting about that.
Yeah, for sure. So there's this is the famous passage here in Job 40, verse 17. He bends his tail like a cedar. So this is where a lot of people have tried to like insert the idea of, oh, it must be like a brontosaurus or a sauropod, right? But it's not described like that at all. And
it's not. Especially since, like we saw in the video, the guy mentioned and pointed out that if he were, a sauropod, brachiosaurus, apatosaurus type of creature with the super long necks, that's designed for eating, trees, eating leaves off the tops of high trees, whereas eating grass like an ox isn't convenient for something with a super long neck. So, yeah. But
Master Soup saying it's a water buffalo. And it just makes me want to sing that song from VeggieTales. Everybody's got a water buffalo.
I remember that. Throwback back in the day. Yes, sir. Yeah. And so people would say, well, a bovine type of creature might not have a tail that like a cedar. It depends depending on how big it is, it still could. So if you can picture a cow like,
go ahead. Yeah, it's about cows. I mean, cows got that little tail that comes off the back of them. You know what I mean? It's not a reptilian style tail, but it's cord like. It's like a thick rope. Mm-hmm. So now you magnify that to the point of what Behemoth's being described as. And yeah, that's a cedar tree. Easy.
Very much so. It could be. But first in the ways of God, he lives in the reeds. The lotus plants cover him with shade. The willows of the brook surround him. If a river rages, he is not alarmed. He is confident, though the Jordan rushes to his mouth. Can anyone capture him when he is on watch with barbs? Can anyone pierce his nose? So that line of the Jordan rushes to his mouth, that to me paints a picture of how big this creature must be if he's able to basically drink up a river. Yeah. That's the picture painted for me.
Yeah, this is pretty fascinating. Huge descriptions here in Job 40, verse 19 in the ESV. It says, "He is the first of the works of God. Let him who made him bring near his sword."
So that ties back to Jubilees 2:11 that we read earlier, where it says that these were the first fleshly creatures created.
That's right.
That's interesting. What does the Septuagint say?
And then that Septuagint, even though the verses don't line up, that's what's up with the Septuagint. Some of the verses are off, but it's the same information, just kind of like sometimes there's more of it, sometimes there's less. It's a different translation. Job 40, verse 14, in the Septuagint says, "This is the chief of the creation of the Lord, made to be sported by his angel."
That's right. Yeah. So the translation you might have most often of the Septuagint, maybe the Brenton Septuagint, would say "played with by his angels." But yeah, it would make sense. Sported sounds more, accurate to the storyline, as we'll find out, because played with kind of sounds like it's a pet and they're just hanging out and having fun with this guy. But no, not quite. Job 40. Sure. Verse 21 in the New American Standard says, "He lies down under the lotus plants in the hiding place of the reeds in the marsh." I pointed that out when we were reading through it because Psalm 68, verse 30 says, "Rebuke the beasts in the reeds, the herd of bulls with the calves of the people." So the only other mention of a type of creature, types of beasts that live in the reeds in Scripture, is bulls and calves.
It's true. Yeah.
Had to throw that connection in there.
Yeah, and also the ox, right, which is just a variant Asiatic version of a bull. So it's the same concept. Yeah, it's beautiful.